Today's theme is Have You Heard of the Prophet, which is essentially a Psalm 101. And that being said, we've been blessed with a wonderful example of leadership, Brother Hassan. Originally of Lebanese ancestry, he was born in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and spent most of his late childhood in Eastern Washington. And in 2002, he moved to Seattle to enroll in the University of Washington, where he was afforded the opportunity to study abroad multiple times in Yemen and Jordan, in addition to being the Muslim Student Association president from 2005 to 2007. He graduated with a double degree in accounting and international business and a minor in Near Eastern languages and civilizations. After graduating, he's been involved in the local community in different capacities, ranging from youth group leader to board member to guest speaker. He works as a certified public accountant and resides in Bellevue with his wife and 2 sons. So evidently, Brother Hassan demonstrates qualities of a leader and those of someone who's always willing to learn more. So please help me give a warm welcome to our keynote speaker.
Welcome. So first, thank you for the introduction. Probably much more than I deserve. Thank you for entertaining me and accompanying me on a day like this. I haven't been here for a while, at least on campus, and so to walk by Drumwater, that's the fountain, right? Yeah, so I understand how beautiful it is outside. I took a picture when I walked in. So thank you for stepping indoors on a day like this. What I'm hoping to do is I don't think you guys want to hear another lecture, per se. Who's had a lecture today? So almost everybody's had a lecture today. So I don't want to lecture you. I don't think you want to be lectured. So I'd rather have a discussion. But there's a couple of ground rules to the discussion, with the goal of being open-minded and learning something, taking away, whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, having some takeaway, something new you learn. In that, the ground rules are: 1 is be respectful of the topic, the speakers, audience, but also be very honest. In that, if there's something that's said or some question that you have, don't walk away without having an opportunity to ask that question, right? Whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, something you struggle. I struggle to understand things in our religion at times, and also Muslims who hear things that can be kind of confusing. For Muslims, it's confusing. The different images you get of Islam. So I think there's a lot more meat in being honest with each other, and also having an open dialogue. So with that, is that okay? Is that acceptable to everybody? Is that agreeable? That we have kind of a short, sweet get through the Psalm 101, because I think probably most people know what I'm going to say, but I'll try to get into some nuances that maybe you're not aware of. And then let's have a discussion. That's how I'd like to do it. And I'd like to do it in 2 different pieces. Everybody can hear me, right? 2 different pieces. One is, let's talk about who Muhammad was. So, okay, for those of you who are Muslim and maybe not Muslim, what do you think the purpose of religion is? This is where it's interactive. Okay, so as a ground rule, I said that it needs to be, it does need to be 2-way. That's probably the other thing I should have mentioned is let's have a discussion. If I'm up here, it's going to turn into a lecture. But if you participate, that it'll be a lot more meaningful, and it'll be a lot more kind of entertaining, and also it'll be a better use of time, I think, as opposed to me just standing here talking one way. So that would need your participation, whether you're in the back or in the front. So if I say, what is religion? What is the purpose of religion? What's your answer to that? No purpose? Yes?
I was going to say to limit people from falling to their desires and causing corruption and stuff.
Okay, so to limit people from falling into their own desires and causing corruption, right? Okay, what else?
There's a guide to how you should live your life.
A guide to how you should live your life. Okay? Any other thoughts about religion, what religion is, or what the purpose of religion is? Yeah?
Social harmony.
A source of harmony?
Social harmony.
Social harmony. Okay? Yeah?
I think it's kind of to explain what we can't see physically, but what is actually out there.
Okay.
What happens to us, for example, after we die, or what is watching us.
Okay, so to understand things that we can't perceive, or what happens next, right, after we're in our graves. So I think those are all good. Before I get, do you guys like riddles? Okay, so I was going to ask you guys a riddle, because I'm like, they're in here, it's sunny outside, there's a fountain going out there, it's probably a nice breeze. So let's start out with the riddle. And I got probably some money in my wallet. Okay, here's the riddle. This is what I do with my colleagues in my team, is I give them riddles because I can see that they're kind of zoning out a little bit. So if I see you guys zoning out, I'll give you a riddle. And if you get the riddle right, you'll get something that's in my wallet. Okay, so this one, and the other thing I learned with my team is I can't start out with the hard riddles, because if I do, then they get really stumped and they get demoralized and they don't want any more riddles. But if I give them an easy riddle, or an easier riddle, and they get it, then they're very encouraged and they're like, yeah, that's awesome, give me another riddle, I want more money. Okay, so the riddle is this. What's a 5-letter word that if you remove 4 of the letters, it sounds the same? Okay, so what's a 5-letter word that if you remove 4 of the letters, it sounds the exact same? You can't cheat, guys up in the front. You can't, there's no collusion. Okay, so, and I'll give you a hint, but let's see if there's anybody who gets it. Yes? Q. Yes. Okay, so, did you hear what she said? The answer is Q. Okay, so, this was the first, yeah, I'm positive. The MSA will reimburse me probably. Okay, so now that I got your attention, so if you guys don't doze off for the sake of doing another riddle so you can get more money possibly, but I think that it's good. I was thinking about that just for you guys. You guys are in here, you're entertaining me, you're accompanying me. So there'll probably be one more riddle towards the end. It'll probably have nothing to do with what I say, but I like riddles and I like sharing riddles. And I usually don't make money off riddles, but I'm glad you can probably go get some bubble tea. Something like that. Okay, so religion, we talked about, it gives purpose, it helps answer questions, brings about social harmony. From an Islamic perspective, and I think this is what we hear a lot, and I was talking to some of the elders in the community about this idea just the other day, is that a lot of people look at religion, and I walked here today, and I was walking behind from front row, and I was walking behind a guy, or a group of guys, and there's like, where's Seth going? And he was walking the other way, and he was dressed up, and they're like, I don't know, I think he's going to church, and the guy's comment was, church on a Monday? And I was thinking about that, I was walking here, because I think that's kind of where religion has fallen, to the wayside. It's been marginalized far and wide. And I think some of the comments that Mr. Cameron said in the UK about the UK being a Christian nation, and the leader of the church saying we're a post-Christian nation. I think there's a lot of discussion about what role does religion at large have in society and have in the modern day. And when it comes to Islam, the question that I raise is, is religion supposed to be something that establishes a vertical relationship? Right? As a Muslim, is the purpose of Islam to establish a vertical relationship? You're really going to hate me by the end of this. I'll stand still so you don't have to keep moving your hand. Right? Is the purpose of religion to establish a relationship between you and a supreme being? Who thinks that's true? That that's the purpose of religion, to establish a relationship between you and a creator? Who thinks that's true, by a show of hands? So, most people, except for the sister right there in the black hijab. So why don't you think that's true?
I think of religion more as if you're, what if someone's really spiritual but they don't have a religion? I feel like a religion is sort of like a book you follow versus spirituality is maybe you do believe in a God but you don't specifically have a religion.
Okay, so in the context of Islam, right? What if I said, the comments earlier, Islam's a complete way of life? I think most of us have heard that, whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, that Islam is this complete manual for how you live your life. Who's heard that before? Or read that? Okay, most of us, right? Most of our parents have taught us that. Most people who explain Islam say, yeah, it's this whole thing of life, and it permeates all realms of social interaction, divine interaction, etc. So, is the purpose of Islam, to establish a vertical relationship? Right? So not just religion, but Islam. Is that the purpose of Islam? Who thinks, yeah, that's the purpose of Islam, is to establish a vertical relationship? That was kind of, people are shaking. Okay. Yes? Okay, you think so? So how many hours a day you're Muslim, right? So how many hours a day do you spend in prayer? You don't have to be bashful.
I don't spend hours a day.
Okay, so probably not an hour, right? Probably not a whole hour. So what are you doing the other 23 hours of the day?
Doing schoolwork.
Doing schoolwork, doing other things, right?
Yeah.
So if I ask the question again, what is the purpose of religion, and more specifically, what is the purpose of Islam? Right? Is it to establish just a vertical relationship? What's the other piece to that? Anyone? If you guys are fine with just the vertical, that's up to you. But we can't say Islam's a complete way of life if it just does one dimension. Yeah? So there's
it also dictates how you're supposed to interact with the people around you, so like your community, family members, etc.
okay. Was that what you were going to say? You were going to say something different?
Well, I was going to say, like, religion would give you, like, hope, and just kind of helps you throughout life, I guess.
Okay, so religion gets, and that's good, taking a step back, so thank you for the comment up there, and also taking a step back about what does religion do? It gives you hope. For me personally, I know life can be hard. I've traveled the world a bit. I've seen life much harder in other places, but without some sort of hope, right? Without something to rely upon that's outside of the world, this world, because some people lose their whole family in an event, right? They're a car accident, they have a crisis that happens, they have no one to turn to. There's people terminally ill in the hospital, and they're immigrants, so they have no brothers or sisters or family members. What do they live for, right? And there's science behind the results, and people who are very sick getting through chemotherapy and other things if they have a sense of hope, a sense of purpose. Oftentimes that's religion, other times it's family, but a sense of purpose or hope. Yeah. Where I was going with this is, I think that, this is my personal belief, is that religion, it gives everything you guys said, but if we say a religion as Islam is supposed to be a complete way of life, I don't think we can look at it one-dimensionally, right? We can't just say that it's supposed to establish a relationship between you and a supreme being or a Lord, between a servant and his Lord. I think it also needs to take into account what the sister was saying up above, was that it also talks about socially, how you're supposed to deal with other people, and how you're supposed to treat other people, whether the environment, whether animals or human beings. Right? And so when we talk about Islam, I think it's important for Muslims and non-Muslims to understand that it's not just a vertical relationship, because some other religions are just vertical. And people who hate religion will say, it's certainly not horizontal. In fact, people don't need religion, because you can be a good person without religion. Right? Has anybody heard that before? That you can be a good ethical person without religion. And I know plenty of people who are religious, but they're jerks. Right? That they claim to be religious, but they're very rude people. And I think one of the interesting things there is that's when people take religion and they only look at it one-dimensionally. That this is just between my relationship with God, whether it's a spiritual relationship or a ritual-based relationship. But it's not a relationship that takes into account God also created other people, other human beings, other things. And part of this thing you're abiding by includes that element, that range. Does that make sense? Right? So I think we need to think about religion anew, at least in the terms of Islam, that it's not one-dimensional, but it's multifaceted, and it does establish a vertical relationship between God and somebody, an individual, but also amongst that person and other beings. Okay, so that's religion. A Muslim is simply one who obviously practices that belief. The other thing that I think is important, and this is where we can talk about, people will say that Muhammad is the founder of Islam. Who thinks that's true? Who thinks that's an accurate statement? That Muhammad's the founder of Islam? No one. Why? Why not?
Because Islam was built upon what other prophets before had preached. Like it was just adding more to like Judaism that was already, or the religion that was already there before.
So it's adding on to previous religions?
Yeah, when they were like in their actual form, before they were sheep or something.
Okay, before they, so original revelation.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody disagree with that or agree with that? you guys, no one thinks that Muhammad was the founder of Islam. I just want to make sure I understand everybody's, yeah.
Muhammad is a messenger.
Okay.
He's not a founder, he's just a messenger of God.
Okay. Does everybody agree with that he's not a founder of Islam? Everybody agrees with it? So people who are, whether you're Muslim, do you agree that Muhammad wasn't the founder of Islam? So if there was no Muhammad, Islam would still be there? Is that what we're saying? So is that what we're saying? We're not saying that anymore. So what are we saying? We're not saying anything at all. So yes.
I guess it would just depend on how you define Islam. Or, I mean, like, I guess Muhammad is the founder of, I guess, the group of individuals that today call themselves Muslims. But I guess the message that he brought wasn't a new one. It was, like, as the sister mentioned, it was one that was brought before by different prophets.
Okay. So let me rephrase what I said earlier. That Muhammad brought about a re-expression of a primordial faith that Muslims believe all other prophets came with. Is that fair? And I think this is an important distinction because from a Western Orientalist perspective, Muhammad is the founder of Islam. If there was no Muhammad, there was no Islam, and he's the one who brought about this new idea of Islam. And for us in this room, and us living in a very pluralistic society, I think it's really important to recognize the interconnectedness of religions. And more specifically, there's principles obviously that permeate all religions, such as generosity, such as honesty, such as honoring the property of another. But the Abrahamic faiths have a very strong interconnectedness. But if we say that Muhammad was a founder of a religion disconnected by 600 and some odd years from these other religions that, other people who brought about a religion, or believed to be a god who brought about a certain religion, then we are disconnecting ourselves, right? We're disconnecting ourselves. So I would say that Muhammad brought about a re-expression of pure monotheism, right? That was the same monotheism that Abraham and Noah and Jacob and Jesus and Moses came with, and prophets in between. But it wasn't something new. And the history of the prophet is that before him, that Kaaba, the cube that is in Mecca, that Muslims consider the house of God, obviously not literally, like God has the keys to this house and he goes in there, but metaphorically, the house of God, the direction of prayer, a unifying symbol, that was built as the first monotheistic temple on earth. Kind of a debate in Islam whether that was built by Adam or whether that was built by Ibrahim and Abraham and his son Ishmael at first. But the point is it was set up as a monotheistic temple. And so then Muhammad comes years later and he re-expresses that or purifies that idea that was corrupted by economics and polytheism in the years between. Does that make sense? Right? It's a very important thing. Because if you talk to somebody that seems very different than you, chances are, if you actually get some of the noise away, right, take out some of the noise, at the root, you're very similar, right, in terms of belief, especially if they happen to be Christian or Judaic or Jew, because the stem is Abraham, and so you have a very common root. So I think that's really important. The other key thing in Islam is the Quran. So Muslims say what? The Quran is what? What is the Quran? What is it? How would you define the Quran? Yeah.
Speech of God.
The speech of God. Sounds like a strong statement, right? It's a book. So is that weird to say that's the speech of God? No. From like a Christian perspective, do you believe that the Bible is the speech of God? Or that the Torah is the speech of God from a Jewish perspective? Right? Does anybody think that? Or is it something that's divinely inspired, right? Hands were guided in the writing of the collection. So the Quran, Muslims believe it literally is the word of God. And so if you notice, why Muslims treat, before they touch the book, they're in a state of ablution, and they generally put it in a high place in their household, out of reverence for it. Those were the main things. Now, I want to ask you guys a question. Do you think it's weird? So, if somebody drew a picture of a person that lived, between the 6th and 7th century, and it was an insulting picture, do you think it's weird? And take yourselves, for you who are Muslims, take yourself out of the shell of Islam. Just put yourself on the outside and try to do it for a minute. Do you think it would be weird if people started rioting and protesting and burning embassies and people lost their lives in this whole chaos? Do you think that would be weird if it was done by somebody in black and white ink in some country I'll probably never visit? Do you think that's weird? That reactions weren't, do you think that reaction's very strange? Or do you think do you think somehow that's very justifiable? And again, take yourself out of the fold of Islam, just for the sake of the example, right? Take yourself out of your own, kind of what you bring, your own baggage. Do you think that's weird? Why? Why is that weird? You said, yeah, why is it weird?
Well, taking yourself out of the situation, I mean, you could just say, well, it's just a drawing of a guy, what does it mean? But that's what people from outside.
Okay, so it's just a drawing of somebody, why are you flipping out? Right? Does anybody think that's totally justifiable and it makes sense in their head? So you guys all think it's weird is what you're saying. Is that right? So why did people do it then if it's so weird? So if you guys don't participate, I'm about to call them. But I don't know most people's names in the room, so I'll just start pointing. But why is it weird? Right? Why? What's that? Yeah.
It's weird because we see pictures of people all the time, like day in, day out. And from years past, we see pictures of people or like drawings. And so the idea that you would draw someone and people will get offended is kind of strange.
So if I, a caricature, what if I drew a caricature of your mom?
I mean, I guess I think it was funny, but not weird. It wouldn't be like.
Would you burn my house down?
Probably not.
Okay. Okay. Why? So what warranted the reaction? Why did people react the way they did then? What was it? Do you guys ever think about that? Why did they do what they did? Right? Over some black and white ink printed in Denmark? Right? Why was it such a painful point for so many people around the world? And it wasn't just like people in Somalia did this, right? It was people who, primarily Muslim countries that reacted this way. But why was it?
Is it reactionary for their lack of control of stopping it? It offends them, right? And they can't really do anything. It's making fun of someone they love or they hold dear. Like right now, what you just said, if you had a character of her mom, we were trying to see if it affected her or not, if it gave rise to emotion, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're drawing a person, and I guess you're trying to connotate it in a negative fashion. They're helpless to stopping it unless they, I guess, do something, unless they make, I guess, a bigger statement.
Did everybody hear what he said? Did you hear in the back what he said? Okay. So I think a couple things. One is getting at the political idea that they're doing something and rubbing it in your face and you can't do anything about it. That's one aspect. But they're also doing it about somebody who you hold dear and is beloved to you. Is that right? Okay. I think those are very valid points. One is they probably feel like it's a little bit of the West, again, snubbing it in their face and they're already being potentially occupied, right? And they feel added salt on top of the wound. But I want to focus on the first point you made, which was, who is Muhammad to a Muslim, right? What does that relationship look like? Because I think that'll help us understand why drawing a picture caused such an uproar. Yeah.
He is a messenger, but we're not supposed to hold him in any reverence as a higher being than any normal person. So it's essentially like worshiping him. If you draw a picture, kind of like make it into like a figurine.
Okay,
If
so
that makes sense.
you're definitely, from an Islamic perspective, Muhammad isn't somebody to be worshipped, very clearly, right? That he's not anything like a god, right? Then what was it? Why did people flip out, right? Why did they react fanatically in an extreme way? Why? Yeah, were you guys saying something over there?
I'm trying, what's this, the event that you're talking about?
The Dutch cartoons in Denmark. So the picture was of Muhammad with a turban, and the bomb was a turban basically on his head. So, but it caused, people lost their lives, and it caused embassies to shut down and boycott of Danish goods in Iran. And so there was a pretty big repercussion. But my question, what I'm trying to get at, is why did that cause such an uproar? Right? Why did people around the world, a person in Indonesia, Malaysia, Afghanistan, Iraq, Arab world, Africa, they don't even know each other's languages, but they all reacted the same way. And why? Yeah.
Okay, so I have two just ideas, just like trying to get in their head. I think one, if you have somebody that you think and you believe is so great, you hear all these great stories about them, and you see them being portrayed in such a harsh way, you get offended because you think, like, well, how much do you really know about it? You're just like turning into a joke. And then two, it's like, you hear this all the time from other sides around the world saying how Muslims are bad, Muhammad is evil, that you, maybe after a while you just get so fed up with it that you just want to take a stand and just like be like, hey, I mean, obviously it's not the right way to do it, and like attack embassies, but they're just like filled with emotions, so maybe they just can't think another way.
Thank you for that answer. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think that a lot of people don't have their voice in other countries.
Okay.
Because how many people in this room would be out, blowing up whatever, storefronts or whatever because of it. So we use our pen, like Prophet Muhammad had told us to do, rather than, taking arms. By writing to the head, by writing to the Danish government, by writing to the author and saying this is wrong and this is the reason we believe it's wrong, because we don't depict our prophets in Islam, and we appreciate that. The same thing's happening with the Noah movie right now, where Islamic countries have banned it, but they're not taking it to the streets.
Right. What I'm trying to drive, and I don't want to beat this up too much, but I think it's really important to understand that for Muslims, Muhammad's an intimate companion. And I don't know if that necessarily exists, maybe it's my lack of knowledge, but I don't know if that necessarily exists in other faiths, where it's someone who you hold so dear that you're trying to emulate them. And like I said, Islam's a complete way of life, and you're trying to emulate that person in all capacities of your life. And so to insult that person is an insult to you personally. I'll give you an example, less meaningful in the big scheme of things, but there was a partner in an accounting firm that I used to work for, and she was very personable, and she was very into developing people and spending time with people and building relationships with people. And it was during the economic downturn, and there was other partners that people didn't really like to work with. They're very rigid, very about budgets, very about numbers, and they didn't have the interpersonal skills. And there was a lot of us who were trying to follow the managerial style of that partner, who was more about developing people and cared about people and looked at the relationships and quality of that. What happened was she got demoted because she was less about the book of business and more about the people that worked for her and underneath her. And when she got demoted, everybody underneath her who felt like she was their leader at their forefront felt like they got insulted, or felt like if we follow what she did, we thought that was right, then we're not going to be successful. Does that make sense? Right? Because we saw her as a true leader and not the other people, because of the impact that she had on us as a leader, as a manager in our office. Muhammad, similarly, Muslims look at him as someone who has a direct impact on their daily life. And if they follow those footsteps, and somebody comes around and insults those footsteps, it's a personal attack on you. And I think very valid points that they don't have the outlets of expression or frustration or they don't have those natural outlets, and so it's bottled up even more so. And then there's a lot of things about, they're pushed towards, this is Islam, and this is what Muslims do, and this is right, wrong, and otherwise. But they've had all that pushed their way, and then it's just like a triggering event for them to react in a certain light. But what I wanted to draw out was it's a very personal relationship with you and a messenger. The final messenger of God. It's a very personal relationship. And each person has a different relationship with that soul. And so when we talk about, have you heard of Muhammad, it's very important to understand what that means to a Muslim. It's really important. So there are people that I've come across that would put this person who they've never met, never seen, and read about as more beloved to them than their own parents and their siblings. It's a very strange idea, kind of from postmodern era outlook. But that's what they would do. They say, this person's more beloved to me than even myself. Right? Than even myself. So I think that's an important point to consider when we talk about who Muhammad is and what the impact he has on the Muslim community. Islam at the core is monotheism. It's bringing about a pure sense of monotheism. And in that, it's also, like we talked about, it's a re-expression of a monotheistic faith, but it's also very much about love and mercy. And in fact, I would say that's at the core. And I think it's worth highlighting, especially in lieu of the media outlets and what they portray of Islam. So if you were, again, for those who are Muslim, take yourself out of the Muslim shell. What would just from watching the news or reading the newspaper, what would your thoughts about Islam be? Right? What do you think the mainstream idea or belief about Islam is in America? Is it good or is it bad? Is it positive or? So thumbs down up there. Thumbs sideways or down? Down. Across the board down. Sideways. Why sideways? Yeah.
Because I think Muslims are representing them relatively well. And there's so many people, Muslims in the media, who are trying to change the image.
Okay. So there's people in the media, Muslims in the media, who are trying to change the image of Islam. Do you think that most Americans think that Islam is a non-violent, happy, loving, merciful religion, and is about to bring flowers to your doorstep? Probably yes or?
Me?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well, I guess, honestly, I think this depends on the region, but I think most people are pretty okay with Muslims. It's just like, some people are just, like my little area, like Muslims have a hard time. Like one of my friends back where I'm from had a hard time because people had thought that she was just bad. But I think most people, especially in Seattle, don't think Muslims are evil. I think that they're more about love and community.
Okay. So this is coming from the most educated part of America, right? A very culturally diverse Seattle. I come from the 509, which is Spokane, right? I was the only Muslim in my school. There was another girl, my sister, right? We're basically the only ones. And when 9/11 happened, I very distinctly remember this. A friend of mine, or I considered him a friend at the time before this happened, I heard about it on the news, on the radio as I was coming into class, and I was like, your first gut reactions, I hope that it's not Muslims. Right? That's kind of your gut reaction. But then you go in, and I remember my friend, who actually went on to the military, but he said, he put his arm around me and then looked at everybody else and said, who do you think did it between us? Right? It was a very insulting, embarrassing moment in my high school career. And high school is when you're really impressionable, right? You care about peer pressure, and you care about what your cronies think of you, etc. And I very distinctly remember that. And when I go back to Spokane, that's what's symbolic about Spokane to me, is that most people probably carry that mentality. Is that most people there don't necessarily have a passport. And Spokane's a beautiful place, right? I don't go there very often. It's got Hoop Fest. There's a couple things about Spokane that are really nice. Bloomsday. Not a whole lot of diversity, but my point is that there's a lot of places. I think Seattle's very unique, but there's a lot of places that don't necessarily think Islam is the most wonderful thing on earth, right? Even though it's like 1 in 3 people or so. Why? Okay, so actually I shouldn't ask why. There's the media. There's things that are outside of our control. What do you guys think? So the Muslims in the room, what do you think? Do you think Islam is about love and mercy? If I say it is, does that mean it is? Does that mean it is? Or do you guys think that it's about other things? Part of it might be love and mercy. It doesn't have to be Muslim. Anybody can answer this question. Do you guys want a riddle? Okay. So there's a man weeping up next to a grave. I know this is Islam 101, but I think the attention is important. So there's a man weeping by a grave. Another man approaches him and says, "Why are you crying?" And he points to the person in the grave, and he says, "Brothers and sisters, I have none, but this man's father is my father's only son." Okay? What is the relationship between the person in the grave and the speaker? Okay, so you guys think about that. Not too hard, because we'll move on. You guys get the answer. Let me know. Okay. And there is a good answer, and it'll make sense if I tell you, but I don't want to tell you quite yet. I'll tell you towards the end. Islam's got 5 principles. Most of us know it, right? It's the declaration of faith, to testify that there's no God that deserves to be worshipped, and that the Prophet Muhammad was his messenger. That to pray 5 canonical prayers a day, to fast the month of Ramadan, to give charity, so 2.5% of your savings every year, and to make the pilgrimage to Mecca if you're financially and physically able to. And then there's 6 tenets of faith: to believe in God, to believe in His books, to believe in His angels, to believe in His prophets, to believe in the day of judgment, and to believe in divine decree. Who's heard of that before? Most everybody, right? There's something also not mentioned, but in terms of that. So you talk about Islam. Islam is 5 pillars. You talk about creed. There's 6 tenets of faith. And then equally important is spirituality in Islam. And that's, in essence, it's just to have a good heart, right? That you should have a good heart and a pure heart and be a spiritual being, be sensitive, like I said, on the vertical axis as well as the horizontal. Meaning that you're aware. So one example is you don't backbite. You don't mistreat people, whether it's an orphan or poor, your parents, etc. And that you can go to God with, no malice, no hatred, no envy, no anger, etc. All these things that can kind of bottle up and actually kill people, right? You're very lighthearted, you're very pure, you're enlightened. But that's something that is the apex or the goal of Islam, and that you have these vehicles of rituals and a creed in your heart to get to that end. There's been a lot of talk about the Sharia, and I'll kind of wrap up here. There's been a lot of talk with the Sharia about, Sharia is coming to Oklahoma, therefore we need to ban it. So do you guys know what that means if we talk about that? Or what Sharia is in the first place? Right? Does anybody have a good definition of what Sharia is? No one? Yeah. Islamic law. Is everybody okay with that definition? That Sharia is Islamic law? Okay? So, why do we need law in religion? Who thinks law is important? You guys think law is important? Why? Why is law important? Yeah, somebody. Why is law important? Especially in religion, right? People say, I don't like organized religion. If you bring law into the picture, that means it's organized and structured. Right? Why is law important then? Right? If Sharia and the thing that's got so much spotlight attention is Islamic law, 1, why is it important? And 2, why has it gotten so much attention? Does anybody know? Or anybody have any thoughts on that? Yeah.
Well, law or Sharia is really important because it on a day-to-day basis. And the reason why specifically Sharia has gotten a lot of attention is because of the way it carries out its punishment. It's quote-unquote inhumane to certain areas of the world.
Okay, so maybe some elements of the law people have an issue with in terms of capital punishment. And you also say it also helps regulate society. Okay? Maybe you haven't, yeah. No, that's okay. I didn't point to you, but you can talk. Yeah.
I guess like law is setting up a limit for anything.
Okay.
And I think people perceive Islamic law as the limit is too much and the punishment, it seems like it's too much for people to handle.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I was actually wondering about the riddle.
Okay, getting back to the riddle. Do you have an answer?
Is it his son?
Yes. Okay. You didn't like Google or anything like that, right?
No.
Okay. So how is it his son?
Because his, the kid in the grave,
Yes.
his dad, it's his dad's son, but if he doesn't have any brothers and sisters, it has to be him.
You guys get that? You want me to say it again? Very well. Very well done. Very well done. So, brothers and sisters, I have none, but this man's father is my father's only son. Do you guys follow it? Did you answer it?
No, I drew it out.
That's okay, you can draw it. You can draw it out. It's okay.
My father's only son.
So, did everybody figure, did you guys follow it? So, brothers and sisters, I have none. So, I'm an only child. So, brothers and sisters, I have none. But this man's father, pretend my backpack's sleeping in the grave, right, is my father's only son. Okay? So, this man's father is my father's only son. But if I have no brothers and sisters, who's my father's only son? It's me, right? So this man's father is me. Okay? So congratulations. I'm not going to tell you any more riddles because I don't know how much money I have left. Okay. I don't even know where I was. Oh, why is the Sharia, right? We talked about spotlight, we talked about attention, and we talked about why does religion need to have laws? Does everybody agree that laws are important? For the most part. So one of the Western philosophers says, where laws end, chaos begins. Okay, where laws end, chaos begins. And so a lot of people who are adamantly against Sharia or adamantly against laws and religion, I don't think they understand what it takes to drive. My wife got a speeding ticket for going 25 and a 30. Right? Thought it was a little aggressive. It turns out it was a 35 speed zone, so she has to go to court. But there is so much, right? There are so many laws when it comes to driving. You have to be a certain age. There's all these signs that mean different things, right? And then you get written up and held accountable and your money's taken away. And if you don't agree with it, you can go to court and you can dispute it in front of a judge and let them dictate. Right? Driving has a lot of laws to do. Just to drive, you have so many laws. But has anybody driven in any other countries outside of America or the Western Europe, etc.? How does driving work exactly there? Is it stoplights? People understand that there's a red light, yellow light, green light, and you go and you stop? Go ahead. How is it? How's your experience with driving?
I've driven in Jordan, and they do have stoplights, but no one really respects them that much, and no one respects the lanes at all.
Okay, no one believes in lanes, and no one believes in stoplights. I've been in Jordan as well. Okay, how else? What about elsewhere? Yeah. What? India? It's a mess. Right? I watched a video with people crossing the street and there's like 20 kids on a motorcycle, right? And you gotta dodge the semis as you're crossing the street. It's really crazy. Right? The driving is probably one of the more stressful experiences I've ever had in the Middle East. Because in Lebanon there's one stoplight and they don't even follow that one. Right? There's absolute chaos. But the point is very similar. Right? With religion in Islam at least, it has laws because with the absence of laws, right, brings about chaos. And that's why there's, from an Islamic perspective, to have the Iraq dictator, what's his name, Saddam Hussein, to have him in power, even though he's tyrannical, was better than the invasion and removing him from power. But why? right? What are the Iraqis saying now? They're saying, he was a really bad guy, and he was tyrannical, but at least we had order and security underneath him. And now there's bombings every day in the market, right? That laws and security, right, are essential for society. And where those end, right, that's when chaos begins. And that's what you see in places like that, where a power vacuum exists. You see absolute chaos. Syria is another example. So when Muslim women were polled in the Gallup poll about what do you want as your source of constitution, your source of law, what did most of them say? Do you guys know? Okay, keep in mind, these are, like, from a Western perspective, the oppressed women under the hand and foot of their husbands or fathers, etc., right? The Gallup poll was done to understand what Muslims really think and believe. What did the women of Iraq and women across every Muslim country say about what they wanted as part of their constitutional base? Do you know? The Sharia, right? This thing that we need to ban and outlaw because it's inhumane and it's oppressive, especially to women. Why did they want this as part of their foundation of their law? You guys know? Yeah, go ahead.
Because what Sharia has practiced in its like actual purest form is, I guess, the best method there is, like, in terms of law.
Okay. So one view she's saying is that because people believe that this is the best form of law, what these women were saying, they're saying, you know what, you can have a governor, you can have a king, you can have a dictator, but if this is something that's part of the Constitution, then they are bound by the laws of religion or of God. And so they found that, and if that says that you have to treat women equally, and they have right to inheritance, and they have the right to property, and they have the right to vote, and they have the right to X, Y, and Z, they're bound to give us rights under this structure. And those are things that don't exist currently. And that's why we want the Sharia thing that's being banned in Oklahoma to be a part of our Constitution in Iraq. It's a very interesting paradigm shift. But this is what, obviously, it's easier to say what people want when you're not those people, but when you ask them themselves, they come up with a very different answer. But it's some food for thought there. So the Sharia comes to establish 5 things. One is the preservation of religion. It's the preservation of life. It's the preservation of, or not the preservation, it's to protect intellect. It's to protect property. And it's to protect your honor and your dignity. Okay? You guys follow that? So here's my question. If one of the goals of the Sharia is to protect life, how can you have capital punishment? How? What is capital punishment? It's death row, right? So how can you have capital punishment, but one of the goals of the Sharia is to protect life? Right? To protect life, protect religion, preservation of religion, to protect property, to protect intellect, and to protect your honor and your dignity. Right? So character assassination, for example, would be prohibited. So how can you have something that professes one of our objectives is preservation of life, but part of its rule is to take life? Yeah?
It protects the life of others.
Life of others.
Yeah.
So, would you guys, no, I don't even want to give this example. Okay, so if somebody goes into a market and is going to, with a gun on a rampage, and is going to take out the frustration that they felt from being bullied for the last 20 years of their school, and they're going to take out their aggression on everybody at a high school or a college, and you have a license to have a concealed weapon, and you saw that person do that, what would you do? Would you stop them, or would you let them wreak havoc and run away? You guys follow the example? So what would you do? Would you just watch them? Yeah, that was a good shot, that was a good shot, that was a good shot. Yeah, okay, she should have dodged the bullet there. What would you do?
You would stop them before it gets to that point.
You would stop them before it gets to that point. So you would stop them.
Well, not me, but...
Somebody would stop them, right? In theory, you'd stop them. What do you think I'm trying to get at? When it comes to taking one life to save 20 or 30 or 1,000, right, it's justifiable in the Sharia. Right? Belligerence belligerence, and that's part of jihad, is that it's to curtail belligerence and acts of aggression and transgression. But it's there to protect the greater good of society. And if that means that somebody is going to harm many, that means that that one person has to be stopped. Okay? And just along the lines of preemptive, most Muslims around the world in the same Gallup poll were asked, would you support a preemptive strike? A preemptive strike on a certain country or people in order to stop a potential attack in the future. Would you support that? And the vast majority of Muslims across the world said no. There's no merit to a preemptive strike to stop a potential attack. What did we do in this country? What did we do? This is not a history lesson, this isn't that far back, but what did we do recently? Right? We preemptively invaded a country because they had weapons of mass destruction, and therefore we had saved the world for the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and a potential onslaught to our people. Right? Is that, if you think I'm being unfair politically, let me know. I'm not a political scientist or anything like that. But there was protests and there was outcries and there was things and marches, etc. But that's what we did. Right? We preemptively attacked because we wanted to avoid a potential attack on our soil or to our people. The Western world is very much supportive, much more supportive of preemptive attack than the Muslim world is, according to this Gallup poll. Right? So it's different. It's very different, and it's interesting to think about putting ourselves in their shoes. Okay. I'll end with this is just a couple of no-nos, right? You guys, from an Islamic perspective, I think there's a lot of emphasis, oh, they can't do this, and they can't do that, and they can't, X, Y, and Z. There's only a few things, really, that are major things that Muslims generally avoid, right? It's the eating the pork, it's having wine, it's taking life, it's stealing, it's lying, it's premarital relationships, it's backbiting, it's a lot of the 10 Commandments, right? Very universal principles. So what my request is of everybody in this room, both Muslim and non-Muslim, is to think of Islam in a greater context, in a different light, and not just one-dimensional in terms of what Islam brings when we say Islam is a complete way of life, but also think about it in a greater context, in a fair context, and hear it from Muslims. And as Muslims, let's take ourselves out of our own upbringing and our own Sunday school, and think about how it is and how would you look at Islam and Muslims if you were not part of the faith, and have a better balance. And I think you'll be more sympathetic maybe to the confusion or the perspective of people that don't necessarily share your faith. And I think that's equally important. And keep in mind that there's a lot of noise out there in terms of different agendas that are being pushed. But if you boil it down, right, you have many, many more commonalities, even as a Muslim minority in Western society. You might dress different, you might talk different, you might come from a different place, your parents don't speak, don't speak English properly, etc. That might be the case, like for my situation. But if you boil it down, there's really not a whole lot of differences in principle. And I think that those expressions of commonality should be explored, and not constantly the discussion of here's where we differ, here's where we disagree, and the defense of Islam. I think we should talk about what Islam is as opposed to what it's not. Okay, with that, I'll conclude. I hope that was informative. I think it went a lot longer than I hoped. I think it was the riddles in between. But I wanted to give you guys some food for thought, and also present things from a slightly different perspective, as opposed to the generic, here's the 5 pillars, here's the 6 tenets of faith, and then kind of move on from there, because I think that that's stuff that most of you guys probably already know. So with that, I'll conclude. Is there any questions that we haven't covered in the course of the discussion? Thank you very much for your time. I hope that was